Today I'm continuing my observations on certain residue concerning 9/11 because of the piece that I'm writing right now, which I intend to publish in time for the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And different things have come up for me at different times. I talked the other day about Larry Silverstein, Lucky Larry, and his good old dermatologist. His dermatologist appointment, which saved his life, saved his skin, just happened to fall on that exact day when the two buildings were utterly destroyed by some mysterious means that caused them to absolutely turn into dust before our eyes. Larry wasn't there. He didn't have to turn into dust. He didn't have to return unto dust. He went on being his good old, I guess, sort of human, if you want to call him that, self. As it is both of his grown children, neither of whom showed up on that day either. But today I want to consider the case of Ted Olson. Now this is a guy who he was made into the centerpiece of the whole 9/11 story in very many ways. And the thing is, and he's still like a high-profile DC reptilian figure. He was the what was he? He had some kind of position in the Bush regime, and Solicitor General, I believe it was. And he had a wife named Barbara Olson, who was this firebrand conservative pundit. And Barbara Olson ostensibly perished on I believe it was 175, the plane that supposedly struck the Pentagon. Of course, there are all kinds of problems with that story, but I'm not going to go into that right now. What I'm going to go into instead is what Ted Olson said in a couple of touchy-feely, tear duct seizing, sentimental kinds of interviews that he gave. One was with Barbara Walter, and I'm seeming to remember that he gave another one to Larry King, but I can't seem to find that interview anywhere. In fact, what's interesting is these interviews, which again were such, it was such a sensationalist kind of, reportage. It was Ted Olson ostensibly talking to his wife, who was on the plane just before the plane ostensibly crashed into the Pentagon. So it was just this very dramatic, going all out, going for sensation, going for the tear ducts, really doing all of that, but also the story that Ted Olson told on this occasion really formed the pretty much the entirety of what is said happened on 9/11. It's on the airplanes. Most of what has been put out there about what took place on the planes is from what Ted Olson said that Barbara Olson told him was happening when she called him from the plane that day. So Ted relates this news, and I will link to the article, which again, it's been mostly removed. It's one of those interesting things where the lie has become so apparent that, as I will discuss in a moment, that they mostly just want to get rid of this thing. They mostly want it to not exist anymore. So if you type in Ted Olson interview 9/11, you get a couple of instances of this interview having been reposted by scholars for 9/11 Truth or something like that. But the original interview that was put up by ABC or whatever network it was, or CNN, when he talked to Larry King, that's gone now. They took it down. And again, it's amazing to me that they took this down, even though, as I will explain, it makes sense that they took it down. But it's still incredible to me that they took it down, because at the time this was such an important interview. This was just like, okay, here's big important guy in Washington, right? This is Bush's main man. He was the one who argued on Bush's side during the electoral dispute in Florida, and so he's a mover and a shaker and a player. I call him a DC reptilian, and I do not take back that designation. I think it applies quite fittingly to Ted Olson. But anyhow, at the time, this interview was just the shit. I mean, sorry to be vulgar about it, but it was like, wow, what an amazing, hard-hitting interview that tells us so much about what happened on 9/11, and is also just this touching, farewell between these this married couple, this power couple in DC, who had one final chance to say that they loved they loved each other before one of them died horribly. So it was really just this centerpiece in so many ways, this interview that Ted Olson gave, this account that he gave, on a couple of different occasions. But the problem with what Ted Olson said is that it can't be true. For one thing, he claimed that he got a call from, and this was a problem with so many of the passengers, and who made calls to loved ones on that day. Most of them were on the plane that allegedly crashed in Pennsylvania, but there were also a couple from flight attendants from one of the planes that ostensibly crashed in New York. And Barbara Olson's ostensible call was the only one that was registered, or that was reported to have been registered from the plane that ostensibly crashed into the Pentagon. But the problem was there was no call. It was determined even by the official authorities when they were processing what happened, that, and I think maybe, I'm wanting to say this was later on, during the case of the so-called shoe bomber. I don't know why, for some reason, Ted Olson's testimony regarding Barbara Olson calling him at the White House, and talking to him in these last few moments of his life, I think that became a point of contention in this trial for some reason. And the whatever the governing body was investigated and found that Barbara Olson tried to place a call from her cell phone, but did not succeed. It did not go through. So it was a 0-second call that she tried to make, apparently, allegedly. Ted Olson originally claimed that she called him and reached him from her cell phone. And then later he said, well, it might have been from one of the phones that they had on the planes. One of the, what do they used to call them? Remember when they used to have airplane phones? I guess they were just called airplane phones. But it turned out that flight was not equipped with airplane phones that worked. So it could not have been from an airplane phone. And it could not have been from a cell phone either. Number one, because cell phones cannot reach, you can't call somebody from a cell phone when you're however, like 15,000 feet, 20,000 feet in the air. It just doesn't work. There is just the factor of that impossibility. But even if you were to say, no, it's possible, it can happen, the fact is that the authorities investigated and they determined that she did not make any call to Ted Olson. Ted Olson claimed that she called once and said, I'm on the plane, the plane's been hijacked, the hijackers have made everybody move to the back of the plane, the pilot is here, what should I do? And then she got cut off, and then she called again, he said, and they talked for a couple more minutes, and then and then they had to say goodbye, say their, I guess, tearful goodbyes or whatever. And so he claimed that there were two calls made. One was for about I think 1 or 2 minutes, and the second one was for a span of he estimated about 4 minutes. But the records show that no call was made. All right, and this isn't somebody else arguing against. This isn't some hostile witness arguing against Ted Olson. This is straight from the records by whatever governing body investigated what happened. They said no, there's no evidence that Barbara Olson made any call. She tried to make a call and it didn't go through. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with the conclusion that Ted Olson made up this whole thing. He made it up. And he went on national television and made it up. Made up this story about saying this final farewell to his wife. And it just so happened that this story had this information about, oh, well, the terrorists have taken over the plane and they're of Middle Eastern descent, and they're wielding knives and box cutters, and so this is where the whole thing about box cutters got started, that they got on the planes and they were only armed with box cutters, and this is the origin of all of that. And it comes from the lips of a man who was not on the plane, who claimed to be talking to his wife on the plane, but it turns out he did not talk to his wife on the plane. So he either lapsed into this deluded state. This is the most charitable interpretation we can take with Ted Olson and his claim. He either just became so overcome with grief that he made up this whole scenario, made it real, and then told everybody about what happened. But I don't really buy that. I think he just lied. I think if you watch this guy talk. It's just it. And again, Ted Olson has remained a fixture of the DC scene. He has played a large role in many of the goings on for the last 20 years or so. Interestingly, he was instrumental in getting gay marriage legalized. Wasn't that interesting? Seeing as how he was supposedly this right-wing conservative guy. But so he's been around. He remains around. He has remained in the environs of Washington, D.C. He's been interviewed many, many times since he made this claim about his wife, talking to him from the plane, which has shown itself not to be true, and no one has challenged him on it. No one has said, Mr. Olson, you said that you talked to your wife on September 11th on the plane, but the records show, the records from the court show that Barbara Olson did not make any calls that day to you. So what do you say to that? No one has asked him that. This is another one of those things, one of those moments where you think to yourself, it's not just that the answer isn't being put forward, it's that nobody is asking the questions that are needful, that ought to be asked. So, and again, it's you can't really, it would be hard to understate the significance of this interview, because it was not only just this big emotional thing that, the sort of the Barbara Walters bread and butter tearjerker sort of thing. Although when you see Olson talking, he doesn't sound emotional at all. I say the way he talks about this moment just reads very strangely. His body language, his tone of voice, it just doesn't sound authentic to me at all. As far as what actually happened to Barbara Olson, there are theories. Some of them seem a little wild. But they might be true, but I don't feel comfortable enough espousing them or even talking about them here. But just mentioning them. I think when we know, as we do with September 11th, that everything that they told us was a lie, was a concoction. Well, when everything is a lie, then that opens the floodgates as to what could possibly be true. And it makes us consider things that we would otherwise probably have dismissed. But I am astonished when I see Ted Olson interviewed, when I see the things that he says, the details that he gives, and with every time that he tells the story, the details are always the same. He's got his story straight, but the thing is, the phone call never happened. It never happened, and no one has called him on the carpet for it. No one has held him responsible for confabulating this conversation, which pretty much launched 2 wars, and in turn caused untold damage to numerous lives. Right? What he claimed Barbara Olson told him, she didn't tell him because she didn't talk to him. So the jive about the box cutters and the jive about everybody being forced to the back of the plane and all of that. It was just that. It was jive. It was jive from Ted Olson. And again, he emerged from this completely unscathed. You know, no one said, "Wait a minute, oh that I guess that conversation never happened. So why did he tell us these things?" Nobody grilled him on it afterwards. It never happened, and he's still around. He's still in the public eye. It's not like he's hard to find. It's just one of those things that lets you know, that reminds you just how deeply corrupt everything is. And on that happy note, I will end this peroration. Thank you for watching. My name's Andy Nowicki. Check out my work at altrightnovelist.com. My latest book, The Insurrectionist, can be purchased at terrorhousepress.com.